Good morning, students. I welcome you all on this virtual digital learning platform provided by Jagrati Classes. Okay, now what we are going to do is our for future separation techniques. अब हमने जो पिछले वीडियोस में separation techniques डिस्कस की थी उससे आगे पढ़ने जा रहे हैं. So what we are doing is we are doing chapter 2 of class 9th. And this chapter 2 is matter around us pure? Is matter around us pure? What we were discussing were the separation techniques. In the last video, what we saw different techniques, that is distillation, fractional distillation, sublimation. Okay? Now the next separation technique which we'll study. The separation technique. It is for the purification of air. So what we are studying is about purification of air. The separation technique used for purification of air is more similar to the distillation and fractional distillation process which we recently discussed. So for the purification of air, a flow chart is made in your books, okay? So the flow chart is what? You have to take your air. The air supply or the air source you have to consider. Then from that, you have to liquefy this air. That is, this air is present in gaseous state. So you have to convert this gaseous state into the liquid state. We have already discussed in our earlier classes how to liquefy atmospheric gases, how to liquefy the air. So the factor responsible for liquefaction here is what? For liquefaction, you have to increase the pressure. When you know in gases, the molecules are very far away from each other. When you increase the pressure, when you compress them, the molecules come closer to one another. And in turn, this air converts to liquid. So what we are doing, if these are the gaseous molecules which are very far away from each other, that is, they have larger intermolecular distance. What you do, you apply pressure from both the sides. If I apply pressure, that is, I am compressing the molecules, then these molecules will come closer. And this would result to a liquid state. And similar is the case with temperature. So for liquefying the gases, you should increase the pressure. Pressure should be increased and the temperature just reverse. That is, you have to decrease the temperature. So remember this. This was also a question which we discussed earlier. What is the phenomenon to liquefy atmospheric gases? The phenomenon is dependent on two factors. That is, you have to increase the pressure and in turn you have to decrease its temperature. Once you have done this, then what you get is, you took air, okay, from your source. Then what you did, you made a liquid air. How this liquid air was made, you increase the pressure and decrease the temperature. So we got the liquid state of air. Now further, when this air has a mixture of many gases, the gases are oxygen, N2, that is nitrogen, then we have carbon dioxide, then some minor gases are argon, helium, etc. So air is a mixture of gases. Air comprises of different gases. Now when you liquefy the air, that is when you apply pressure, a gas which is carbon dioxide, CO2. Okay, this carbon dioxide gas does not convert to liquid. If you remember the examples of sublimation discussed earlier, what we get is, when this carbon dioxide is acted upon by increase in pressure and the decrease in temperature, this carbon dioxide which is in gaseous states, it directly jumps and converts to the solid CO2. That is solid state of carbon dioxide. And this solid state of carbon dioxide is known by a common name. And the common name is dry ice. Sometimes this is a GK question, that what is solid CO2? So solid CO2 is nothing. Solid CO2 is called as dry ice because it has extremely lower temperature and it is used for cooling. So this is what our solid CO2 is. So when any gas or when any substance changes from gaseous state directly to solid state without changing into liquid, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड गैसियस स्टेट से डायरेक्टली सॉलिड में बदल गई है विदाउट चेंजिंग इनटू द लिक्विड स्टेट. सो दिस प्रोसेस इज कॉल्ड व्हाट? When a substance converts from gaseous to solid state or solid to gaseous state directly without undergoing the change to liquid, it is called sublimation. Correct. So this process is what? This is the sublimation of carbon dioxide. So here when you convert the air into the liquid, this carbon dioxide will automatically separate out, and you can see the diagram given in your books. There is a separate apparatus made which is called separator. In separator what we get? In separator this CO2 separates out into a different constituent and it is called solid CO2 or dry ice. So अभी तक हमने mixture of gases that is air ली थी, and then we applied high pressure and decreased the temperature, so we got a liquid air. Now this liquid air is further acted upon. Now from this liquid air CO2 has already been evolved in the form of dry ice. Okay, we can write CO2 is removed, and it is removed in the apparatus which is called what? Separator. So this CO2 is removed in the separator. This separator is mentioned in your book diagram. Now what you do is you take a fractional distillation column, and as I have told you earlier, in the fractional distillation column the gases having higher boiling points will settle at the bottom. So while if we compare the boiling points of various gases, then what do we observe? That we get nitrogen in the top part of the column, that is at the apex of the column. Then we have argon here, and then at the last we get oxygen. I'll write their boiling points, and I hope you will get the concept. It is minus 186 for argon, minus 183, this is 196, and this is minus 186. So as you can see, there is also a question given in your books that why we have to separate all the gases, why we have to remove all the gases first, all the gases to get oxygen. केवल अगर हमें ऑक्सीजन से काम है, अगर हमें ऑक्सीजन चाहिए separated out from the air, then why do we need to carry out such a large and complex process, and why we have to remove nitrogen, argon, CO2 first? Because of the boiling point of oxygen, oxygen gets collected at the bottom of this column. Okay, I have already discussed this concept in fractional distillation. So here the oxygen gets collected in the bottom column, and to get this oxygen what you do, you remove all these gases, nitrogen and argon. Okay, now this was the process of purifying air. This technique can be used for the separation of different components of air. Now what we are seeing is our next separation technique. It is water purification. This is also mentioned with a great diagram in your books. The technique of purification of water. The water purification technique I'll explain with a flow chart. So first of all what you have is, you have your source of water, or what you call as a reservoir. This reservoir can be your lake, pond, anything. Then when you take this water from the reservoir, it is passed into a tank which is called sedimentation tank. We have sedimentation tank. You know that the water from the source or water from the reservoir is full of impurities. You have different kinds of impurities. Some are soluble in water and the others may be insoluble. The insoluble impurities, if they are heavy, they are found at the bottom part, and if they are lighter, then they float on water. Okay, with this we can also have a third type of insoluble impurities which remain suspended in the medium, and these are called as suspensions. So what we have here is, from the source, the water which is coming contains many impurities. So this impure water we take first in the sedimentation tank. These are huge tanks which are used in the water purification system. So when we take impure water in the sedimentation tank, what will happen? The larger insoluble impurities, the large and insoluble impurities get settled down at the bottom of this tank. Okay? These larger impurities settle down at the bottom of the tank. So now what we pass on this partially pure or partially filtered water into our next tank, and this tank is called a loading tank. You understood in sedimentation tank what we did? We didn't add any chemical substance. We just took our water from the source and poured it into the sedimentation tank. Here what we observed that the larger insoluble impurities get settled down to the bottom of the container, and this technique is called sedimentation. I hope you have learned sedimentation in your junior classes. So now we pass on this water, the impurities settle at the bottom, and the clear water from the top is passed on to the next tank, and this next tank is called loading tank. Then what we have in loading tank, we add certain amount of alum in it. Okay, alum, the common name of alum is Fitkari. If you are familiar with the name, for water purification, when these filters were or aquaguards were not discovered, we used to purify our water using alum. So what we add is, we add a piece of alum or some amount of alum in this loading tank. What does this alum do? All the insoluble suspended impurities are now removed. Here we removed insoluble larger impurities which were heavy and which settled down at the bottom of the tank. Here what we are removing is, here we are removing the insoluble suspended particles. Okay, these are not heavy or light, these are just suspended in the bulk of the medium. So we add alum, and the function of alum, it attracts all the particles, all the suspended impurities, and these collect, coagulate and settle at the bottom. So here in the loading tank, by adding a piece of alum, your suspended particles or suspended impurities are removed. Now this water, now the partially clean water from here is passed into the next tank. This tank is called aeration tank. In the aeration tank, what we do, or better I write it, a filtration tank. This is filtration tank. In the filtration tank, you have different layers of the solute particles. That is what you have. To the bottom, you have large stones, which is called gravel particles or your coarse sand particles. Then you have some small stones here into the next, second last layer. Then above this layer, what you have is, you have sand particles. This is your fine sand. As you can see that the layer present at the bottom is made up of larger particles. These larger particles, let's suppose this is our gravel. As the particles are larger, they have space between them. They cannot be much tightly packed, so they possess some intermolecular spaces between them. But as you move to the top of the tank, what you see is, if you take these fine sand particles, the fine sand particles are very small. So these fine sand particles can be packed together very compactly, very densely. And what you get here is less intermolecular spaces. Okay, so the sand particles have very less intermolecular spaces. We can in fact say they have negligible spaces. And what about this gravel, which are the large stones? How much you keep the gravel together? You will have certainly some intermolecular spaces. So when this water from the loading tank is passed on to our filtration tank, what do we observe? We observe that all this water has some impurities. Okay, it contains some floating impurities still. So these floating impurities, which are comparatively smaller in size, these are what? Smaller sized impurities. These are filtered as the water passes through the different intermolecular spaces. As the water passes down, the impurities are filtered because these different layers act as sieves. I hope you understand what do you mean by sieves. Okay, sieves we use in our homes for filtration. Sieves, in Hindi we call it channi. So these layers act as sieves. In sieve, what do you have? you have some holes or pores in the sieve from which you do the filtration process. Similar is the case with these layers. In these layers we have intermolecular spaces. दो molecules के बीच में we have empty space, खाली जगह. It behaves as the hole. So when the water passes down through these layers, then the different size impurities, the larger impurities are separated on the top, okay, on passing through the sand layer, and as the water passes down, the more smaller impurities also get separated. And in turn, what we have is, we have a tube here which collects all the clear water. All the impurities get stuck. All impurities get stuck in these intermolecular spaces which are present between our layers. And then as the water passes down, then what we have is, we have our clean water here. Okay? So this we have clean water. Now the last tank, what we have is, from here we have our last tank which is called chlorination tank. And in this chlorination tank, chlorine is added. What is the function of chlorine? Chlorine, you all know, it is a non-metal, it is a chemical, and I have already discussed the application and uses of chlorine in the previous video lectures. So chlorination, it is used to kill the germs or the bacteria which are still present in our water. So chlorine is added in a particular fixed amount, okay, so that our water gets disinfected. All the germs present in our water is washed off or removed by the addition of chlorine. And now this pure, safe water is transferred to our homes and in our industries for drinking. So this is the water purification system. Firstly, we take the water from our reservoir and we pass on to the sedimentation tank to settle the larger impurities. Then this water is passed on to the loading tank. Here in the loading tank, we are adding alum, a small amount of alum, and this alum has coagulation properties. Coagulation means it attracts all the impurities towards itself. All the suspended impurities are attracted, they form a heavy impurity mass, and this heavy mass settles down. Then next we have our filtration tank. In the filtration tank, this clean water or partially clean water is filtered through different layers which are having different amount of intermolecular spaces. And then we have in last our chlorination tank where we add certain amount of chlorine, and it kills what? To kill the germs or the bacteria, harmful disease-causing pathogens which are present in water. And now this whole, after undergoing such a long process, the clean water are supplied into our homes. So this was all about water filtration. We saw the purification of air and we discussed just recently water filtration technique. Now what we are doing is the last portions, okay? We have to do only some last portions, and these are what? Firstly, in the introductory class of this chapter, when I started the chapter, from the first video, I show you a classification. That is, matter can be divided into two, pure and impure. Impure are called mixtures. Now we are studying that pure can be divided again into two parts, okay? What we did is we divided matter into two, pure and impure. Impure, in mixtures we had homogeneous, heterogeneous mixtures. Now what we are studying, the classification of pure substance. Already it is being introductory told in the first video. Pure substance is classified into two parts. These are elements and compounds. So we can divide pure substance into two parts, elements and compounds. What do you mean by elements and compounds? We have to see. So I am writing as usual the points of difference between them. Elements, these substances can't be broken, they can't be or cannot be broken into simple forms, okay? As these are already the simpler forms, they cannot be broken into simpler substances or simpler forms by any kind of chemical reaction. By any kind of chemical reaction. So the important term is they can't be broken. इनको हम further तोड़ नहीं सकते. They are already simple. We can't break them more. But coming on to the compounds, they can be broken. Okay? Just the difference I am writing. Elements cannot be broken, but compounds are the substances which can be broken into their constituent elements. So we see that compounds are already made up of elements. Elements are the pure things, and when these elements combine together in a definite ratio, they form what? Compounds. So here coming on to the elements. For example, the example of elements are O2, that is oxygen. Then we have N2, nitrogen, Cl2, chlorine, okay? So these are some examples of elements. See here, O2 is already a stable diatomic form. We cannot break O2 further into anything. So O2 is a element. Now these elements can be further divided into three parts. We can divide these elements into three categories. The three categories are what? First one is the metals. Next is metalloids. And the last category is what? Non-metals. So these elements can be divided into three parts: metals, metalloids, and non-metals. What do you mean by metals? Compounds showing some properties which follow the properties of metals are known as metals. And what are the properties? The compounds which have luster, that is shine. The compounds which shine are generally kept in metals. These I am talking about all the general properties. ऐसा नहीं है कि जिन भी चीज़ों में शाइन दिखेगी वो सारे metals हैं. No. पर ऐसा भी नहीं है कि जिनमें शाइन नहीं दिखेगी they are non metals. These are just the general properties कि जिसमें शाइन दिखती है it may be a metal. So luster means shine. Then the next property is sonorous. Sonorous means when you hit a metallic object on a surface, it produces a definite distinct sound. So this is what sonorous means. Okay, it produces a metallic or distinct sound. Like you see, मंदिरों में जो bell होती है, घंटी होती है, it is made up of metal. When you smash the bell, जब bell बजाते हैं, तो what we observe, we hear a sound. So metals produce a characteristic sound, and in turn they are called sonorous. Then the metals are ductile. Ductile means from a metal you can make a wire, okay? The most common is gold. If you take gold, then gold say we make necklace, and necklace is what? A wire. So metals show ductility, that is they are ductile. Next is metals are malleable. Malleable means they can be made into sheet. If I give you a block of gold, gold is a metal. If I give you gold की block, what you do if you hammer the gold? Hammer से अगर आप मारोगे, then it would convert into a thin sheet. So we say that metals are malleable. Then metals are hard. Okay, so these are some properties of metals. Coming on to non-metals first. All these properties shown by metal are not possessed by non-metals. That is, non-metals are generally soft. They are not ductile. They cannot be drawn into wires. They are not malleable. They cannot be drawn into sheets. Okay, we can't make a sheet of non-metal. Then they are non-lustrous. Non-lustrous means they do not have any shine. So these are the just reverse of each other, just opposite, metals and non-metals. Then what do you mean by metalloids? Metalloids, those substances which show intermediate behavior. They show intermediate behavior. And intermediate behavior means they show some properties similar to metals and some properties similar to non-metals. So as a substance, for example, the examples of metalloids are boron, then comes silicon, and the next is germanium. Many more examples are there, okay? You can read it from your books. These are the three common examples of metalloids: boron, silicon, and germanium. Why do we have to make a separate class? Because we identified some substances like boron. These show properties related to metals also and some properties related to non-metals. With this, they show some different properties which are not related to metals and non-metals both. So we made a different class and named it metalloids, okay? Because most of the properties are similar to metals, but due to some differences, they are kept in a different class of metalloids. So they show intermediate behavior, or they show properties of both metals and non-metals. So these are called metalloids. So this was the classification of elements. Now next we classified elements. Okay, firstly we classified pure into two kinds, that is element and compounds. Then we discussed metals, non-metals. Remember one thing, mercury, that is Hg. Mercury ka symbol is Hg, and it is a only metal which is liquid at room temperature. Mercury is the only metal which exists in liquid state at room temperature. Have you observed mercury anywhere? Yes, correct. In the thermometers, mercury is filled. You see the mercury level rises and drops down when you check your body temperatures. So only metal which is liquid, metals are generally solid at room temperature, but the only metal which exists in liquid state is your mercury. Okay, this can be asked sometimes, this question. Now moving on to the next. Next given in your books is the difference between mixtures and compounds and physical chemical change. So we'll study these 5-minute topics, that is the difference between mixture and compound. Both of these things are formed when you take two or more substances and you mix them. Either you can get a mixture or you can get a compound. Firstly, I am giving their examples. Let's suppose sand. Sand is a mixture. We have many substances in the sand, but these substances are not present in any fixed ratio. We do not have a fixed ratio. Sand mein what you have is, the major constituent is SiO2. Okay? The next constituents can be, you can have chlorine or nitrate in your sands. Next what you can have your pebbles, that is small stones. Different sands have different quality or different amount of all these materials. कोई sand में fix नहीं है. If you take the sand sample of the nearby place or near your house, then what you get, main component will be SiO2. The next components, you might get more amount of pebbles. And if you take the sand sample from a different place, might be it is so fine that it does not have any pebbles. So sand here is only a mixture, that is it contains a random amount of all these things. But if you consider water, that is H2O, what you get is, for making water, if you want to make water, then anywhere if you try this, you have to take 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. The number ratio of H and O should be 2:1. Then only you would get water. So compounds are those substances in which the ratio remains fixed. Ratio of constituent elements or the ratio of constituent substances remains fixed. While in this, the ratio is not fixed. So this is the first difference. I hope you understood the examples. Okay, sand ke liye we can take any number of or any amount of this. So the ratio of all these elements in the sand is not fixed in amount. But here, if you anywhere try to make H2O, then always you have to combine 2 hydrogens with 1 oxygen. Then only you would get H2O. If you combine 1 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, what you get? You get HO. And you know this is not water. If you reverse the ratio, that is you take 1 hydrogen with 2 oxygen, then you get HO2. HO2 will never show the properties similar to water. So these are the difference between mixtures and compounds. In the mixture, the property of mixture is similar to all of its elements. That is, no new substance is formed. No new substance forms. While in the compound, when you mix elements, that is you mixed hydrogen and oxygen, both were the gases. Hydrogen was highly inflammable. When you mix this, you get a liquid water. That is, from the gaseous reactants, you got a liquid product. So here, new substance forms. Okay, so remember this difference in the mixture and compounds. More certain points are given in your books. Do revise them and learn the concepts. Now the last topic which we are discussing is a very short one, that is physical and chemical change. What do you mean by physical change and chemical change? Physical change, जिसमें only interconversion of physical states occur. Interconversion of states. Then the next point is here, no new substance is formed. No new substance forms. For example of physical change, consider melting of ice. Melting of ice में क्या होता है? We take H2O, that is ice in solid form, and when you keep it or heat it, then what you get? You get the same thing, that is H2O. So nothing new is forming, just the state is changing. From solid it has changed to a liquid state. So here I have written interconversion of states is called physical change. No new substance is formed. H2O का H2O ही रहा. Nothing is added, nothing is removed. These changes are generally reversible. Reversible means I can again form the liquid to solid by freezing it. So these are reversible. The next point is these can be separated by physical processes. They can be separated by physical process. For example, evaporation, filtrations, etc. Then the next of this is chemical change may, there may be interconversion of states or there may not be interconversion of states. But here a chemical reaction occurs. So chemical change means where a chemical reaction has taken place. The next point is what? Here new substance is definitely formed. For example, when hydrogen reacts with oxygen, what you get is, you get H2O. If you try to balance, then 2H2 reacts with O2 to give 2H2O. So here it was a gas, here also we had gas, and the product is different, completely different. You took hydrogen and oxygen and you got water which is in liquid state. So here new substance is formed. Then the next is, these changes are irreversible generally. Irreversible means you cannot convert this water again into hydrogen and oxygen. It is a really difficult task to go back to the original reactants. And the fourth is what? It can be separated. It can't be separated by physical methods. They require special chemical procedures. Special separation techniques are required for their separation. So these were the basic difference between physical and chemical change. The example of chemical change, as already mentioned here, it is the example formation of water. So this was your chemical and physical change. Now I would like to give you a question that, can you tell burning of candle is what? This is a very frequent question which is asked in exam. Burning of candle is what kind of change? It is physical. Is it physical or a chemical change? You can pause the video and answer, okay? I am giving you the explanation. It shows both type of changes. That is, it is also a kind of physical change, plus it is also a chemical change. Can any one of you explain how it shows both nature, that is, it is physical change also and chemical change also? Okay? Try to do this. I am giving you the answer to this. Physical change, because you see the wax in the candle which was in solid state, it simply melts and forms the liquid wax. So this is the interconversion of physical states, that is solid se liquid ban gaya, then it is a physical change. For chemical change, what do you have? You know that, let's suppose this is your candle and this is the thread of the candle from where you burned the candle. This thread is called the wick of the candle. When you burn the candle, here the liquid wax of the candle accumulates. You all have seen a burning candle, I hope. So when you burn the candle, near the wick, the wax melts down due to high temperature and converts into liquid state. This liquid wax is absorbed by the wick. The wick of the candle absorbs the liquid wax, and due to the high temperature, this liquid wax around the wick goes into the wick, and due to the burning of candle, it is converted to the gaseous state. This liquid wax converts to a gaseous state. Here we had a wax and the gaseous state, that is, it converts to carbon dioxide gas. So as you all can see, we took wax and what we get is a completely different and a new product, which is carbon dioxide. So when a completely new product forms, then we have a chemical change here. So this is an example that burning of candle shows both kind of change. Now we have completed with this our chapter 2. Okay, if you have any doubts regarding the chapter, you can consult me anytime. Moreover, please do practice all the in-text questions given in your book and all the exercises mentioned are at the back of the book. Please do revise the concepts, learn it. Okay, thank you for joining. We'll next for the next chapter in the next video. Thank you.